So I've touched on a few things here. Just want to say, so for ISF members, you have access to a lot of things. For if you're not an ISF member, I think we've got a few links you can go and check out in the attachments section. But we have the standard of good practice, which is a kind of framework of controls. ISF Assure, which is a whole a suite of tools that kind of look through risk management, benchmarking, supply chain assurance. Actually, I've hardly even touched on supply chain today. We're running another webinar at 11 o'clock on Friday, if you'd like to join that, talking about supply chain threats. Obviously, a really core part of understanding resilience is having resilience in your supply chain. So we have a suite of research and tools around that. We have research around protecting the crown jewels, threat horizon that I mentioned. Looking ahead, extinction level attacks. What's the playbook to deal with it? To deal with what happens when one of these really damaging events happen and everything goes offline. A range of reports around human-centered security, engaging with the board, understanding security leadership, measuring security. I mentioned how do we kind of communicate, measure change, and communicate that to the leadership. How do we deal with AI? We've got an AI insight series, and also I talked about vulnerability management. We have papers around identity and access management, vulnerability management to kind of understand how to implement all of that. So I do not have time today to run through everything we have, nor do you, but there's loads of information out there, loads of guidance from the ISF driven by our members. So please do go and check it out if you can. And yeah, I think that's probably about it from me. Reached the half-hour mark. So yeah, we're looking forward to taking some questions.
Okay, thanks, Rich. If anybody does, we've had a few questions come in. I'll get to those in a second. If anybody does have any questions that they want to ask Rich, then please put them into the relevant section on the interface, and we'll get round to answering those. So first one, Rich, thinking about stakeholders, which stakeholders within the organization would we need to work with to build resilience against cyber attacks?
Yeah, so I think I touched on a few of them there, but certainly the C-suite is the starting place. So let's take if you're a CISO, who do you need to build relationships with? So often CISOs don't report into the board or the C-suite, so it might go through the CIO or the CFO. So obviously direct leadership, but then who do they talk to? So yeah, absolutely, that you've got the COO and the CEO, I think, need to have a high level understanding of these. They might not need daily briefings unless something, an incident is ongoing, but they do need to understand the risks. So really bringing in that very top level. And where we've seen a good security culture and strategy, it's definitely, you've got active involvement from the C-suite and the board. I mentioned the board, you need the governance side of it as well. So who is overseeing what good looks like and making sure that all these frameworks are in place. Obviously for large organizations, multinational organizations, you have a lot of legislation and regulation you have to get on board with now. So it's becoming a legal obligation to have certain security requirements in place. You look at things like NIS2 and DORA. So having the board understand, the chairman or those responsible for the legal side of things, obviously chief general counsel, another good person or office to have on board. So there's a real range. So that's at the leadership side, and I guess that's where you want to start. But then there does need to be a good level of understanding throughout the organization, because attacks will be targeted everywhere, right? If you think about how phishing works now, what AI is letting attackers do is write incredibly sophisticated, well-crafted emails that could can be targeted at anyone through an organization. Far easier than you don't get the telltale giveaways of bad spelling and grammar, for instance, these days. People are they can. We haven't talked about deep fakes, but you're getting to the point now where people can really imitate or send messages potentially even in real time impersonating a CEO or someone high ranking. So you need people throughout the organization to understand it, but certainly start with the leadership.
And I suppose when thinking about the minimum viable organization or company, you really want the very top people right up to the CEO to have some kind of involvement in that. And I know we always kind of state that in a lot of our reports and things like that, and I appreciate how difficult that can be. But I suppose if you are talking about what is a minimum viable organization to get you through a period of disruption, you really do need the very top of that organization to input into that. Perhaps not across multiple workshops, but you really need to have their input, because they may have things that are sort of just within their head, really, in terms of where they're going with the organization and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and they're also the ones that have possibly the best understanding, organization wide. So, and this comes up a lot when we talked about protecting the crown jewels, when we did the research and talking to members all over the world. What they get when they do these workshops and these questions, they go out around the business to understand, okay, what are the key assets, the key processes? They get way too much back because they go to every department and all those heads of departments say, this is critical to me. And of course, everyone, it's their job, it's your livelihood, it's what you do, it's what you care about. So everything that we do is critical. But you need someone at a higher level to be able to take those ruthless, difficult decisions and say, this is more important than that. And that's what we'll prioritize first. That you can't get that from almost kind of mid-management or kind of department heads. That needs to come from the very top to understand, for the whole business, for us to carry on operating, to enact our strategy as we see it, that comes from top leadership.
Okay. So bearing that in mind, in your experience, Rich, writing the report and all the sort of various other conversations you've had throughout your career, what's the best way, do you think, and I appreciate this is quite an open-ended question, but what's the best way of getting buy-in or budget from those individuals, from the leaders, from the C-suite, right up to potentially the CEO?
Yeah, like most things, it's taking the time, I think, to build relationships. That's what it comes down to. Is you might not, when it first happens, you'd just be seen as a firefighter or someone like, okay, there's an incident, we'll go to the security person. Over time, I think a lot of the people have said, if I have to report to the board every 6 months and I'm only talking to them every 6 months, I'm kind of screwed, right? Because that's all they hear, that it's a line item, they tick it off, they move on. They said, a lot of people say all the real decisions happen outside that meeting. Those board meetings tend to be kind of rubber stamps. If you want to have a real impact, you need to actually understand who in that room is going to help you, and is going to has the responsibility, kind of like understands the risk, and is able to kind of support the budget. So it's setting up kind of more informal or catch-ups outside of those board meetings. So it's kind of building that relationship over time to the point where you're seen as, I think I talked about, a trusted advisor, not someone who's going to say, we must have this now, please give me budget, but someone they can go to with questions. So it's not being the department of no. Again, we hear this over and over again with security, or the team that says, oh, okay, we try and put the brakes on the new business process because we need a control around it. It would be better if someone came to you as a security practitioner in advance and said, this is what we want to do. How do we do it securely? It's taking the time to really, it's a people skill, it's a communication skill to build relationships over time. So it's probably, again, easier said than done. And we know that churn of jobs makes that difficult. Politics always gets in the way, so people hold certain things back. But it does require a bit of time. And obviously, I said, don't waste a good incident. If there's something that's happened to a competitor or a partner, obviously, or someone in your supply chain, you can highlight that and say, look, are we ready for this to happen to us? And that's often the question you'll get. We've seen it happen. Are we ready for that? What if this happened to us? So having a good response is good there.
And I think it's comforting in an age of AI that actually what we're talking about here is experience. We're talking about people skills. We're talking about skills that you develop over a period of time, which is why the more experienced people tend to be in those senior positions, because this isn't a one size fits all easy answer. It's all based on kind of individual human relationships, which are very, very subjective in terms of the people involved. So I think in an age where it's sort of build AI can do everything, there are certain things I think that are going to become more important over time in this regard. So okay, and then in terms of we always speak about resilience from the kind of cyber perspective, but there obviously are other dimensions to it. I know a few years ago we had an incident in London due to the terror attack on London Bridge. Now the business continuity plan was initiated at that point, and everybody was sent home and all that kind of stuff. But that wasn't a cyber incident. So I suppose what we're saying really is those security professionals can kind of become general advisors in terms of resilience across the business, rather than necessarily just in the cyber domain or in the technology domain, but have a kind of wider remit, which again, it gives a little bit more in terms of selling the kind of cyber information security solutions at that level. So I think there's certainly opportunities there.
Yeah, I think security people should be a key part of business continuity management teams. Yeah. I'm not necessarily sure who has to run them. I think it's probably an enterprise risk function, because there's all kinds of different things. Like you said, there's terrorist incidents, kinetic incidents that can kick in. But obviously, cyber these days, when we think about how businesses run, the fact we're doing this call online means that everyone is dialed in online. No one's in an office watching this. It's without information systems and IT, most organizations just don't run. So yeah, obviously you need that those security teams and IT people on those business continuity management teams.
Yeah. Okay. So just moving across to a couple of questions that have come in. So first one, so we spoke about knowing the vulnerabilities, or you should know the vulnerabilities. Who in that sense is you? The comment there is security knows the vulnerabilities, but often it is not enough. I suppose it's potentially putting those into business language. I don't know, but Rich, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. And there's a balance to be struck there, because there are so many vulnerabilities that appear, right? And we're seeing them more and more now with AI being able to identify them. So yes, security does, you need probably a dedicated team to understand and know where they are. You can't, it would be counterproductive for certain other people in the business to need to know every single vulnerability, or to have kind of weekly reports. And we've seen this time and again, it just goes over people's heads, right? If you report, we know that reporting technical metrics up to business leaders can just generally just gets ignored, because it's just a repeated thing, and it doesn't mean very much. So yes, you need to know. There probably needs to be a certain high-level indicator that gets reported to say, okay, we have patched a critical number of vulnerabilities, or we being able to tell business leaders we know there are certain vulnerabilities that we are flagging up as a risk. But essentially, yeah, it's a good question, because it's one of those balances to be struck. You need to communicate that there are vulnerabilities, that there are certain systems that might be unpatchable. Like I said, they might be legacy systems. So the people that run those need to know the risks, or kind of have other controls built around them, so you don't, air gapping, for instance, so you don't have to patch them all the time. But otherwise, yeah, there's a balance to be struck between understanding them and then communicating those that are serious enough to require immediate action. But essentially, having a patch routine where users expect, yeah, okay, we're going to be required to patch every 2 weeks. Most people it's every month. I suggest that probably needs to speed up a lot of the time, looking at the cadence. But it tends to be an automatic update from Microsoft for most. That's probably enough for most people. But yeah, I guess what I'd say is don't be tempted to over-report that, or to feel that has to go to absolutely everyone, because it will end up being just noise, which means that the key messages that people will understand won't necessarily get through.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that as well, Rich, I think so. We've been thinking about this internally, and I think going beyond technical vulnerabilities into sort of people vulnerabilities, and I think something we've seen is there are at times single points of failure that are people oriented, and I think then you're back to having a business conversation about could the business survive if this person is out for a period of time, or decides to leave, or succession plans, all those kind of things, which I think are more business problems, but start with a security or an operational vulnerability. So yeah, I think widening the conversation as well can be quite useful in that regard.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's gone some way to answering that. The other one is, and I'm sort of deferring to you on this, Rich, because I don't actually know. It's a bit more of a question around what do we provide. So do we have a ready-to-use checklist / questionnaire to assess the current posture on operational resiliency with respect to IT and cyber? I don't think we do.
Well, the closest thing I point to, we have the benchmark.
Yeah, the security health check benchmark.
So we have benchmark, and so you can benchmark yourself against your own organization, but against others, and you essentially how that works. If you're not an ISF member, we have our standard of good practice with, how many is it? 6,000 controls.
That's nearly 7,500. I think
7,500 now. Yeah. So there's lots.
According to AI.
Yeah. The full benchmark. Yeah, we turn the majority of those controls into questions, right? So we're asking, do you do this, or to what extent do you do that? So you can conduct a full benchmark across essentially every control, or that you have in your framework. But you can tailor that as well, right? So what I would say is, you could, in terms of assessing your operational resiliency, and you'd want to tailor that down to, okay, what are the controls around what are our core controls, or that maintain our resilience. So you would ask delve into the various categories and topics within the benchmark and kind of answer those questions. I think that's probably that would be the closest we have to that kind of ready to use checklist. And yeah, the other side, I would say, in terms of checklists, is we have the report on extinction level attacks. And this is something I think we put it at the beginning of the paper. We recommend you print it out, because the idea is it's for use when no IT is available, but that has a bunch of checklists in it to do with resilience. So, okay, do you know what your core systems are? Who are you going to call when this goes down? What are your backup options if you don't have IT? Literally, can you use pen and paper, fax, WhatsApp? What are those kind of contingency plans? So you've got all of those kind of in a checklist. So I'd say, yeah, that's another way you could look at that from the extinction level attacks paper.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think with the benchmark, there's so much stuff there. You need to narrow it down to topics that are purely resilience. But yeah, there's certainly enough information and value in there to set something up in that regard. So thanks for that, Rich. So just to say, we're probably going to be finishing in about 5 minutes roughly. So if anyone does have any other questions, please do put them into the chat, and we'll get through those. So the last one that I've got here, Rich, again, bit of an open-ended question, but I'll throw it anyway. What are the security basics, quote, that everyone should have in place?
Yeah, so I touched on them when asking those questions. So when we talk about, do you understand your assets? So first and foremost is data or information classification. So yeah, it does every piece of, do you have metadata attached to all the data lakes and the data sets and the information that you have, just to understand what you need to prioritize, and what support, where are the dependencies, what supports certain processes, because that is the basis of how you would, if we think about the minimum viable company and understanding the processes, okay, to protect that process, I need to know what I can, from a security point of view, we protect the assets really more so than the process, because it's the assets that will be targeted. So yeah, you kind of, to have that in place, you need that kind of data classification in place. Risk management. So do you have good kind of risk management in place? We haven't talked too much about we have our methodologies with IRM2 and information risk assessment methodology, and we also have a quantitative information risk assessment methodology. Those are now actually being combined. We're producing IRM3 very shortly, with this month actually going to have the first kind of quant and qual risk assessment methodology. So yeah, do you have a good risk management scheme in place? And then in terms of more kind of core controls, yeah, for me a basic side is the vulnerability management, patching, etc. Do we have anti-malware detection and response in place? Yeah, application firewalls, etc. So anti-malware firewalls, and then if you're building from the ground up, we'd say, do you have network segmentation and kind of network controls? So do you know who's trying to access? And part of that is linked to another one of the basics, identity and access management. If you know what you have, the next part is, okay, who should have access to what? Do people have the right privileges and the right access for their job role and only their role? So yeah, that's a really important kind of I think those, from a technical point of view, I guess I point towards data classification, identity and access management, and anti-malware firewalls. I think pretty much every organization needs that in place.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the questions. I haven't seen any more come in while we've been talking. So, I guess probably then just push you for one final comment, Rich, one final remark regarding this topic. I'll leave it open-ended, up to you, but perhaps something that people can go away and start looking at after the webinar.
Yeah, I'd say act now. I guess in 2 words, is like I think I touched on. The situation we have now is kind of critical. We know organizations are under attack from multiple different angles, and pretty, the pessimist in me says it's only likely to get worse. That threat landscape, if we look at the way the geopolitical situation is shaping up, the way the world seems to be fragmenting, the fact that we've got a lot of, once you hit economic difficulties, criminal organizations will be opportunists. They will target, as, just go after the easy money. So act now. If you haven't been attacked, it's only a matter of time, or if you haven't suffered one of these incidents. If you have, you probably know the pain, and you want to do more. So a lot of this, we've talked at a really high level about a lot of this stuff. It is, once you get into the weeds, we know it is difficult. Just trying to understand what the minimum viable organization looks like is tough. It takes several, if you're doing it for the first time, it's probably, we know it can take like 6 months to go through a crown jewels exercise to identify all those crown jewels. And that's just the identification stage before you even get to think about, okay, how do we protect what we've identified? Get started. The sooner the better in terms of dealing with this. And there's plenty you can do, but do it quickly.
Okay. Well, thanks, Rich. We haven't had any more questions come in, so I think we'll call it there. Great presentation. So thank you again. So that does wrap up our session today. Thank you for all joining this morning. I hope it was useful. I think we got to everybody's question, but if you do want to reach out to Rich, his contact details should be up on screen. Whether you're an ISF member or a non-ISF member, feel free to reach out. We might kind of push you in a certain direction as to your membership status, but we're happy to speak to anybody about this, really. So we look forward to continuing the conversation on ISF Live and our global digital community for those ISF members. If you're not yet part of the community, then head to the attachment section to learn more. And while you're there, please leave us a feedback rating. We really appreciate your thoughts. And it drives, certainly for those ISF members, it drives what we do in terms of certainly in the research team, but also across other departments within the ISF. And don't forget to join us today at 1400 hours BST for our second showcase session, Securing AI Applications, Understanding the New Attack Surface. I think we can all agree AI is absolutely everywhere at the minute, and I think there's probably a few people looking for answers to certain questions, perhaps answers that AI can't provide. So do tune in for that if in any way you are using AI and you want to secure those AI applications. And we hope to see as many of you there as possible. So thanks again, everybody. Great session, Rich. And we hope to see you on another ISF webinar very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks all.